Hello, dear viewers and dear listeners. Today I have something very special indeed because I am joined by a guest. And I don't often do this, so you know that when I have a guest on, it is a special occasion. I have with me today Oscar Becher from Vinegar Syndrome, who is the Archivist and Vault Manager at Vinegar Syndrome, and we're going to get into what all of that entails. But hello, Oscar. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. Long-time fan of the show, so as I've said before, and yeah, honored to be here. Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. We've been chatting by email for months now, and we've kept saying we're going to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels like a long time coming, but it's good timing because we're recording on Black Friday, and this will probably go live the same day. And there is a Vinegar Syndrome sale as well, to tie in with Black Friday. So we'll get into all of that. But how are you feeling for Black Friday and what's on offer?
Tired. I feel like I'm feeling particularly tired. I think the whole, this particular Black Friday. I think to anybody who doesn't know, we do two major sales and a bunch of others now, which people criticize us for. But two major ones. We have the halfway to Black Friday, which is kind of like our way of saying we have stuff, it's just a different time of the year. And then we have our big Black Friday, where it's basically right before everybody re-signs up for subscriptions. But we have, we have this is kind of when we have the premiere titles, the really big things that have taken the longest. So this particular slate, I'm really proud of, and I think everybody at Vinegar Syndrome is incredibly this is a really special one for everybody. I think, not that the ones before haven't been special, they have been as well, but this year has been particularly a really big learning curve for most of these titles to get them on disc. So, yeah, I'm tired, but thankful. Yeah.
No, that's good stuff. So I guess before we talk about titles, there'll be some people watching this. Most people will know Vinegar Syndrome, but perhaps people that don't. Could you kind of give a brief intro to what the label does and also what you do as part of Vinegar Syndrome?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So Vinegar Syndrome is, we're in this realm, this new distribution realm of the boutique label, is often thrown around, and is your namesake as well. But I think every one of these different labels has their own specific niche, like Criterion, the best of the best. Arrow puts out weird, crazy shit. Kino puts out really a little bit of everything now. But Vinegar Syndrome kind of started as, I kind of think of it as almost like an orphanage or something like that, for the films that never really got the premiere releases and never really got the preservation level quality of some big thing that everybody wants, like your Halloweens or your Citizen Kanes or something like that. But so it started out as a company by four people, kind of started it. There was Ryan Emerson, who did restoration, a lot of the branding. Ralph, who did a lot of the behind the scenes work of making finances happen, making license deals happen. Ian, who helps out with the technology and everything like that. And then Joe Rubin, who is mainly in charge of, he brought a crazy amount of his own film collection in. And he had one of the largest collections of vintage erotica and XXX stuff and cult films. So from the very beginning, everybody had their different ideals. Ryan wanted to, Ryan was like a digital savant, and he wanted to make the best releases possible and really cool releases that would engage people. Ralph wanted a successful company where everybody was a family. He got that. Everybody kind of got what they wanted. And I think Joe wanted a safe place for films that he acquired. And cold temperatures, because, the namesake Vinegar Syndrome comes from the way that triacetate decays. Basically, the one of the main components of triacetate is triacetin. It's a plasticizer. Not going to go into it too much, but eventually when it breaks down, it starts becoming smelling like acetic acid. So vinegar. Vinegar is acetic acid mixed with water. So essentially, we had a bunch of crazy, really rare films, lost films, things that were the OCNs, the original element. And we were at that point, back then, this was a digital lab. There was no way to put these things out. So vinegar syndrome largely started as a method for putting out these movies where we could be the guardians and the actual exhibitors of these rare films that we thought were abandoned but really important. So yeah, so that's kind of where it started. And as archivist and vault manager, there are many different facets of the company. I'm in charge of the film archive. So we have I think at this point we're going on, I think we have 35,000 reels of film, which has all been gone through and identified, and we put it in a database, and which is the standard procedure for most archives. Like in the UK, you have BFI, enormous, really successful, great archive. And in the States, we have LOC, Academy, George Eastman Museum. We kind of follow the same standards as if we were a nonprofit. But essentially, the archive is just a part of the business. It's this weird facet of it where I don't make any money for the company. In fact, I unfortunately spend a lot of the money that we get from sales to buy archival supplies and help acquire more films, whether it be on auctions or eBay listings or banana feed, like big banana feed was found from the BFI that you talked about. But yeah, so that's kind of how the whole company started out. And now we ship direct to consumer, and basically these sales are kind of like the big method that keeps us afloat. Unlike a nonprofit, we're not funded by taxpayer money or, we can't apply for grants. Everything comes from sales. And, so part of that for me is making sure that people know that we're also an archive. We care about the preservation of this stuff. We don't just want to put something on a disc, basically throw the film elements in like a storage locker and just say, it's on disc, it's done. We care for everything, and we provide a new home for it. And then people provide homes for their new Blu-rays. So, yeah.
Because I think from the consumer side of things, so from the collector standpoint, I think a lot of people just assume that films are just kept somewhere and they're kept safely and they're easily accessible, which is just not the case. People don't really know, the hard work and the effort that goes into looking after films and then restoring them, finding films that have been lost, all that kind of thing. It's only actually through my own collecting and running the channel that I even know about that stuff. Everyone else in my life who is not a collector has no idea any of this stuff even exists.
Yeah, no, totally. But that's the importance of physical media too. I think when you can hold something in your hands and you're able to kind of be the famous example is when distributors give information about the film elements, where it was found, or they tell some mythologies about it, where they're just this was found scoured in a theater, found in the annals of Thailand or something. But I think that's really interesting because of the fact that, you're right, it's a tangible medium, and almost all types of tangible mediums. Film isn't, until prints in the 90s and 2000s, largely. Film was not made out of the same stuff as synthetic plastics like plastic bags. It's breaking down actively. And if someone is holding on to rights and not releasing their film now, they think it's going to increase in value. It's not. It's going to get bad quickly and maybe unusable if you wait too long. So, I think it's really important that people know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the modern age of physical media and the internet and streaming, we all think of films as these permanent things that have existed since they were created and they will always exist. But I suppose filmmakers, especially the further back you go in cinema, they didn't look at their films as a permanent thing necessarily. They were almost like how you would put on a theatre show, and it does a run, and then the run ends, and they've moved on to the next thing. So there hasn't always been a real push to preserve the film reels and the original materials because they just had no concept that in the future this is going to be important.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, it's examples like that where if you look at like early cinema, like if you see um, very early things, they're all going to be, everyone's always like, oh, that's such poor quality. It looks so bad. Their technology was so undeveloped. It's not because of that. It's because of the fact that, in fact, they were still using kind of similar processes where basically you'd have an original negative and you'd print out and you'd make some prints and then you would melt down if you had too much negative material because it's not usable. If that film is not marketable, you would melt that down, take its silver content, and make new prints or new negatives. You know, so yeah, I think it's really important, especially as we go forward, because it's just as important today as it was for those films. I think those films are more in need oftentimes because they're older. There's a larger chance that they're going to be decaying. But yeah, I don't think those filmmakers were thinking that it was going to be longer than a week or exhibition was going to one day extend to the entire world at the touch of your finger. You know, I think if they had known, maybe they would have taken better care of it, but they would have had to get through decades, decades of time of holding on to something that technically to them wasn't useful and wasn't making profit or wasn't making money. So yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think about that kind of stuff a lot because I'm just like, how do I get people to understand that if they have home movies, they should get on it now, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's one of the things, you know, if someone asks me the hypothetical question of if I could go back in time and meet someone or do something, because of my interest, I obviously think of film and going back in time and just saying to certain people, you know, look after this, you know, or, you know, big examples like with the Magnificent Ambersons, Orson Welles, you know, preserving that lost cut, you know, making sure that the studio heads don't just destroy the cuttings. And, you know, I think about that kind of thing. That's what I would love to do if I could time travel. I'd go back and kind of educate people.
I think that's one of those facets of this, which I'm glad you said that. The Magnificent Ambersons is a perfect example because it's not just films as a whole that become lost or fragmentary, or there's, you know, studios meddled with this. This is an enormous economic machine, and many voices saying, no, this should be shorter. This should be like this. But today, even one of the things that I like is very tricky is that still, to this day, there is an enormous issue with those cuttings and outtakes and trims because they're not seen as marketable. And it's not because they're not important or interesting. It's because of the fact that most distribution companies do not have an archivist or someone trained in film handling. It's weird to say that in film distribution, but most of them do not have like a film handling guy. Especially as we shift more into the digital realm. So a lot of these times you'll have to rely on basically, you know, oftentimes these archives like the BFI or LOC or Academy, if something did slip through that was like a lost cut or something like that, which is really rare because oftentimes they will not take outtakes or this kind of stuff because it's just so much material. But I'm currently working on something for a film where it's a lost cut, but the image materials were taken out. There's like 30 minutes of image to cut it down, I think, to like hour 40 or hour 30, and but the sound materials are still gone. and it's going to be a half and half issue, where basically if you have an OCN and then you make an interpositive or an internegative, you'll have a finished version and you'll have an accompanying track. With something like this, they threw away the track first. It's the most disposable thing for them because it's just pure silver content. So I think it's important, and it's just about the extra added work. Like, I'm trying to do a documentary about why it's important to save this stuff, because of the fact that I agree with you. I wish the Magnificent Amberson stuff was not thrown away, or didn't just disappear because of, like, you know, maybe it was fires or whatever, but like, but it wasn't treated as unimportant because of the fact that it was not important as a film. It was mostly because of the fact that it requires so much extra work and took up so much space that there's almost no way to justify it to something which is like a for-profit company, you know, which is the eternal crux that I'm constantly wandering between as someone who works for a for-profit company trying to do the right thing, you know?
Yeah. What do you think of the people that are still searching for that stuff in Brazil? You know, the Magnificent Ambersons.
Oh, amazing. I mean, I think you probably heard about the Scarlet Drop. I believe that's what it's called, the Lost John Ford movie that just turned up in Chile. This is, I think these are, to be perfectly honest, these are, for me, the heroes. These are the people who dig up that kind of stuff are really the unseen heroes in, like, the film world. Because literally, this is, I can imagine, I don't know what the Chilean National Archive is like, but a lot of these times, national archives, especially for countries with a limited theatrical output, will oftentimes have very widely fluctuating budgets. And I can imagine that while those materials, maybe those materials have were stored in perfect condition, oftentimes they're not. And the film, surprisingly, the tints look really nice, everything looks amazing. But yeah, someone literally had to dig in, open up two or three crusted metal cans, and have to say to everybody in Chile in Spanish, this is important, but unfortunately it's important to the United States and John Ford and the world, but it's you know, Chile is circumstantial rather, in that particular instance, even though Chile has an enormously important cultural sway on film history too. But I think those are the heroes for me, honestly.
In a way, it's like archaeology, isn't it? They're like film archaeologists, you know, digging up things. What was the one where... Is it the Bill Morrison documentary about the ones that were found in the ice, in the frozen lake? That's just crazy.
Dawson City Frozen Creek, yeah. Frozen Time, yeah. Amazing. Incredible movie. Yeah. I mean, that's, to be perfectly honest, and I'll tell you this. Every single, like, film archivist who keeps doing it, because there are a lot of people who kind of, like, enter film archiving and they kind of think you're going to be watching movies all the time and it's going to be, like, you know, everything's going to be easy. You're just going to watch movies, and you're going to tell people which movies are the good ones, which ones you can watch. But all the ones which have continued doing it, I think, cite that film as a really important film to them. Because that film was beyond abandoned. Sorry, for context, the film is Dawson City Frozen Time by Bill Morrison, is essentially about the Library of Congress's rescuing of a bunch of silent films that were abandoned, basically thrown into a pool behind a theater and buried. And the thick layer of, it wasn't into a wet pool, no water in it, but they threw dirt over it, and the layer of permafrost kept it at the right temperature so that it would not experience like the level of nitrate decay that would normally be seen in something which was just kept on the surface, you know. But I think that's a really important film for people because it also shows people that it's a material. It's something tangible. But yeah, I yeah, I think that's a really big one for me. Hopefully, hopefully there are more film finds like that. But that is so expensive, and even back then they didn't know how to deal. Sorry, I'm gonna keep. I love this movie, and I've delved into it for so many.
Please.
Yeah, I love that movie also too, because one of the things that I really like doing, I kind of like going where, I think the things which are kind of like lost causes are honestly what I kind of think are like the most interesting because I like trying to like reverse the lost causes. And with that film, it was a really big learning curve for Library of Congress because of the fact that these big film rescues are really costly, but when an institution actually jumps in to do it, it needs to be done really quickly. Like in this case, I think they needed to do it super, super quickly. But the issue in this case was there were, while the permafrost kept it really cold, there was also lingering moisture in the actual film material itself. And back then, I don't think they really realized. They knew that they had to refrigerate it while bringing it over, which is what they did. But the refrigeration also, and the bringing it into the truck, unfortunately dried out a lot of the film too. So with regards to a story like that, which the Library of Congress is very good and straightforward about it, like George Willman will talk about this, and he's like, I wish if I was there, and making the decision that I know now, I would like do this differently. Where now there's like a proper method that most people, I mean, it's still kind of rare. You mostly just think, let's get it out of there. But with a case that bad where you're rescuing like thousands of reels of film, which probably half of it's not going to be usable, it's very tricky to know what to do. You're just like, let's get it out of there and get it to our place. But yeah, I think about that all the time because I deal with a lot of water damage stuff, which people say is unsalvageable, and I just do a bunch of experiments on trying to figure out how to make it salvageable. And I think that's a weird facet of the job, which I think, in my opinion, has kind of saved some releases and some more complicated ones, which are like, otherwise would not have sound materials or would not have a specific section, which is really pivotal to the actual narrative.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there was one of the films that you showed me. Was it New York Ninja? The one that doesn't have the audio track, does it? That was a really great one to watch.
Curtis Spieler deserves all the credit for that one, where essentially, yeah, that was I believe it's, I'm always blanking on it, but I think it's 1984 movie, where essentially film is a really complicated medium where you have all these different stages. There's pre-production, there's production, and then there's editing, post-production. And when that film was completed and then never went to post-production, they ran out of budget. They spent all the money on the film, and then essentially with that particular film, they had Nagra tapes, but they never got to that editing phase where they used those Nagra tapes to make an actual editing, sound editing format. So essentially, even if they did, or they tried to do it, it would just have been so expensive. They threw out the tapes a long time ago because they were just like, no one's ever going to do anything with this. So with New York Ninja, Curtis had a restoration artist and one of the really pivotal people at the company had to learn how to read lips. And basically, it's like such a weird release because it's a 2022 movie, 2022, I think. But all the audio is recorded in the same style as a 1984 movie would be, in that he's trying to match the actual lips of what they're saying. He made a whole script. He wrote out a whole script because all of the footage was obviously just not shot chronologically. He had to piece together the narrative, and if you see the movie, it makes no. Imagine seeing like the sword fight at the end before the actual first killing of the New York Ninja's love interest or whatever. Sorry, spoiler alert. But he had to piece that all together, and I think for me, Curtis is a big inspiration because of the fact that he literally did that himself, and he pushed for that, and it was because he saw value in something that no one else saw value in, even though now everybody is like, oh, Vinegar Syndrome, the ones who did New York Ninja, which I think is a real big badge of honor, because I think it's just such an ambitious, totally unique project that I think as a film archive and a grouping of weird, highly ambitious, motivated people, I think, I feel like maybe we were the only ones who could probably have done that the justice that I think that film actually does deserve. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's very cool.
Well, that's why I'm so thankful that Vinegar Syndrome exists, because I would have never heard of that film otherwise. You know, I live on the other side of the world, and it's a film that ordinarily wouldn't have been distributed or completed by anyone else. So it was, in the case of this, it was just a handful of people that made it happen, or even one person, you know, makes something like that happen.
Yeah, no, totally, and I think, but I think it is like a little bit of an inspiration to me, where it's just like, you know, not to be cheesy or like whatever, but one person can literally make a difference in the actual life of a film. You know, and I've been looking for the next New York Ninja. You know, I want to find the next thing which got to that very specific niche stage of we have enough money to shoot everything, but we can't hire an editor. Or get the negative matched, or make a work print. They never made a work print for it. So, or work print, they never printed a work print from the OCN to make an actual cut version. So, I've been trying to find that next version, and it's really difficult. Like, it's such a rarity, but it just proves, because, someone like Curtis who's like a really skilled film director, and film enthusiast, and I think of him like a historian of like the type of movies that New York Ninja is literally in. It was the perfect confluence of like ambition, skill, and like just a care for the actual time itself, care for film history or something along those lines. But yeah, I'll share with him that you said that. That's very, very cool.
Oh, good. What would you say to the people that would look at a film like that in the state that it was in, and they would say, well, it's just not worth doing? Or even larger than that, people might look at a whole selection of films and say these films are trash, they're not worth doing anything with. Why bother? What would you say to that kind of viewpoint?
I get it. I get it, but no. Yeah. I think about that all the time. I think with how the company has grown, the truth of the matter is, like, I'm very proud of the fact that we put out the underdogs and the things which are like no one really gave a chance to be on the right foot, and have kind of largely grown out of like cult voices, like voices who in tandem said, I want to see this. This is really important to me. And then another person said, well, it's important to me. It becomes an us situation. So a single person saying that something is important can eventually reach a cacophony, or like worse, just like a screeching at, why isn't the keep out? Paramount, why don't you putting out the keep? But I think it's definitely like I get it, but I think it's just it just rings true, this aspect of the fact that archives across the world are dealing with each of their own New York Ninjas, whether it be edited films which have never been edited, or films that the international audience probably may never get exposed to because they're not marketable enough to. But an archive's sole function is to save things regardless of possible later benefit, or later cost benefit rather, and hopeful cultural benefit in 100 years or something like that. So having these big institutions, we're pretty much a little bit over 10 years of a company. We're kind of starting like a little bit behind everybody else, but we're focusing on a specifically under what's it called? An I don't know, underappreciated time in film preservation, where I think a lot of the nonprofits are doing this really great work. A lot of them are dealing with nitrate film, which really does need to be done now. You know, it's like, I think just a year and a half ago, I believe at this point, the entire Georgian national nitrate vault caught on fire, and all of that is lost. They said everything was copied. There's no way everything was copied. And that's going to continue happening because this is while nitrate's flammable, it's usually the things around film that keep it from going up or disappearing. It's neglect, it's people not caring enough, or people not seeing a benefit to things. So for me, the goal, or the little rolling ball down the hill, is just like, you don't know if it's not important yet. So just treat it as if it is, and if it's not, then you lost $7 on a film can. I think there's a short-sightedness to it when you actually, if you've ever seen someone's film collection, like a private collector's film collection, it takes up so much space. Basements full of it, attics full of it, closets full of it, and you're called a hoarder, which probably a lot of these people are. We love them because they save a lot of stuff, but also keeping things in that kind of state without actually letting professionals who have access to the best possible material, or a room away from a scanner like we are, it's kind of a detriment to the actual, even though it's saved, it's not going to survive that much longer. It's a big unknown. So I think it's valuable to save things and to give it to people who are, one person can make a difference, but you have to pass it off eventually to somebody who has the commitment to take it to the next 200 years or something like that,
Yeah. And I suppose there's always, as technology has gotten better over the decades, there's always people that are at the forefront of the technology that think, now we no longer need the original film because we have it digital and we have it in the best quality. We don't necessarily need the physical material. But of course, people have always thought they've had the best technology all along. And, people take it for granted with the whole digital storage, that all of that stuff could get lost somehow,
Yeah, totally. The digital stuff is really scary to me, because I think we have a lot of, in the internet age, I think importantly, it's very easy to pass news off to other people who also care about these things. And there's a really big emphasis on watchability or streamability, where if something is, you're able to see it, you're able to kind of be like, oh, this is good, I think this is important. You can talk about it, write essays about it. But the digital side of things is incredibly precarious. I think cloud is a big unknown, and I think people think it's much more of a solution than it actually is. If you're on a subscription model and you're dealing with proprietary technology, which is owned by private entities, if you don't pay your subscription for after a certain amount of time, how are you going to get that material back? Eventually, they're going to clear out their vaults too. And for me, that's why I think, digital, there's an answer to film preservation. It's keeping the original film. and it's keeping it regardless of the fact that it's out or not, or streamable or not, or anything like that. Even if it's really vinegared, I keep really vinegared stuff, in the hopes, that something, somehow we can get more information out of it later that was eaten away by acid. But the issue with digital preservation is it's still such a work in progress that it's a, LTOs are a current solution, like linear tape open, which Lindsay does, our digital asset manager. But it's basically storing things on multiple different sites, and that's the best scenario.
Because you can always, you can always. People always say, "Well, we won't lose this because we have a redundancy, and we have a redundancy for the redundancy." So, but who knows? All of those could fail in some kind of circumstantial thing, and then you've got nothing left.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to wish for the next like Y2K situation, but you almost want to like if something like that were to actually happen, instead of just be a myth, or like everybody's scared about it. But a lot of these materials are based on it's a material. Like cloud is a coil under the ocean, made of actual physical materials, and LTOs are made of I believe they're now synthetic polyester. But if the actual you buy the wrong type and it has an adhesive, which they skimped a little bit on the price on just to get a tiny bit of a lower price compared to another company, that like it could delaminate and you'll lose everything. So it's so complicated because it's such a ever-changing issue, and it's something which there's no job security for archivists is a constant issue, where we're constantly the first ones to get fired because we're the people don't see us as the ones who are making the profit or making the we're not like we're not the ones who are able to we're not the ones writing all the essays and basically doing the screenings and stuff like that oftentimes. But we're the first line of defense against the loss of an actual film or title. And if you're the first person on the scene, there's going to be a second person and a third. So it's very tricky. It's very tricky. But I hope that we can actually find a solution to digital preservation and, I don't know, get out of our weird learning phase. But it doesn't seem like there are any tangible solutions that I can really see beyond just keeping the film and providing access to really good copies on something like what we do with Blu-ray, which is you get a really good copy of it, the best you're going to need for your TV. And I think that also, seeing the imperfections of the actual material, I think does really teach people of this is the best that we can do with what we originally had. Let's not fix it up too much. Let's not this is a material. As long as we keep it in that, I don't know, general frame. I don't know. The whole thing is very, even right now I'm uneasy thinking about it because there's so many things that we haven't digitized yet either. And I haven't watched, and no one has watched. But it just, it's a constant motivator to continue kind of digging through and finding more stuff, I suppose. But yeah. Oh. It's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to make you think, about scary stuff in this conversation.
No, please.
But
I need to be reminded. Yeah.
So I guess if you're saying that, the job of an archivist is already not the most secure position, I guess there isn't really much infrastructure in terms of education and people that might want to train to do what you do. I guess is there many. Say, for example, I wanted to get into it and do what you do. Where would I go? What would I even do? Where would I start?
I love this question. So the contrary to like there isn't infrastructure. It's a very small, close knit like group of people. But I think there are currently mainly 3 graduate programs in the U.S. You can study at UCLA. If you're on the West Coast, there's which I've heard great things about. Essentially, they're doing amazing work there. It's one of my favorite thing about my time. One of my favorite achievements, if I can call it that, is for our little blue cans. If you see in the videos, we have these blue cans when I show the archive off. The blue cans are from a specific company, archival company called Tuscan, and we did the second largest order ever of Tuscan cans because we're just like, let's get this done. Let's get all of it inventoried and organized. And then I thought it was going to be the biggest, and I went to Tuscan and I was like, who? The second? Who could do bigger than this? And they're like, UCLA. So UCLA has an amazing, so they're supposed to have a really good preservation program. I didn't go to it, but I've heard really great things, and they're great professionals who've come out of it. A lot of people who are in the industry in archiving. There's also in Rochester, New York, there's the Selznick program, which is where I originally was trained to be a film archivist. And I cannot recommend the Selznick program enough. If you actually want to learn every single thing that goes into maintaining an archive, going through collections, handling materials the proper way, that means like posters, stills, they have scripts, they have the first moving image, like they have zoetropes and zoopraxinoscopes, and zoetropes, and they have all these kinds of things, and it's an entire film history in just one space. They teach you how to do everything, and that's kind of where I caught the bug of being obsessed with handling film. But they even said it throughout the entire thing. They're like, when you get into this field, they warned us. They're like, you're going to jump around a lot. There's the archivist jump, where you'll have to go to locations and that location for a little while, for 6 months, and that location. And it's largely because of the fact that, the job is very niche, and sometimes institutions find film, and they find a large amount of film, and it kind of happens comes to their doorstep, and they have to deal with it. But a lot of, it's, having a film archive is a cost-prohibitive thing. Most people cannot do it. It's cold storage, it's dry air, and on top of that, it is recanning and inventorying things. That means we also have to pay for a subscription if you want. Like, our database is a paid subscription. Another proprietary company. But they warned us. So I cannot recommend that place enough. And you get to learn from really great professionals. So there is like a little bit of an infrastructure, and if you, I think at every major archive there's someone who's working there, who's from the Selznick School at one point. So, and then in New York City there's NYU, which I also went to because I need a break. But I went to NYU to learn more about the digital side of things and digital preservation and video, and that's kind of how I kind of learned how in its infancy it is. So there is like a really strong educational background to all this kind of stuff, just depending on what your area of interest is. There's also iMuseum in Amsterdam, and there are a few other archival programs around the world. And there's now an undergraduate program in Colorado too, which is, I think, groundbreaking. I think it's really important. I wish I had learned about film preservation when I was doing a paper on early cinema and the Sklodowski brothers when I was in Berlin. I wish I had known about that. But I think little steps like that show that regardless of how the industry is going to change, there's still going to be a very constant renewing pool of film archivists who are kind of floating around, trying to find jobs, trying to keep jobs. Yeah. Yeah. And then eventually landing at like an institution which values their work. And yeah, where like, but administrations change, and like even government institutions change, and that can affect, like regimes can affect federal archives too, so. But yeah, that's where I learned those two places. I've heard great things about UCLA, and they're teaching really valuable stuff, I think. So if you're curious more, and they also both of these all these institutions, I believe, have done a lot of publications about research that's been done in their actual programs. So even if you want to like just learn about this stuff, it is there's publicly available information, and you don't have to pay for school. I also advocate like a lot for, you don't need to go to school for this. You can if you listen to the right people and like care about the actual process of saving materials and digging up stuff and the really complicated workflow of getting things out there, there's also a way of doing that. You don't need to go to school. It just is really helpful, and it'll give you more of a stable ground to walk on when you actually enter the field. So
yeah, well, hopefully some people, maybe one person listening is thinking about it and actually seriously wanting to get into it, then they can definitely go and check out those institutions and programs. I might move on to something else now, because we are going to talk about some films and some of the ones that are in the sale. But before I do, I want to talk about something that I think we briefly talked about over email, and that is film restoration and perhaps some of the issues facing restoration, particularly around revisionism. And it's obviously quite a big topic, particularly from the consumer side, when we buy a film on disc and we see that it's not quite right, or it looks different to something else. There is this question of what is the right version? Is there a right version? Should people not be given total control over how a film looks if it's just one person? What are your thoughts on all of this? I know I've just dumped all of that on you, but yeah.
No, I think that's a really really good point, and I don't think that it should be just one person. I think you're completely right. I think it has to be like but I think authenticity is a really enormous part of this, because in the end we're not going to get New York Ninjas every time where something wasn't finished. Most of the time this movie was finished, and it was experienced in a theater the first night. And the first night that a print is shown, that is the definitive version of it. So there is an experiential aspect of that actual first showing or first screening, where we're trying to reach an ideal, but inherent in every single print is generational loss. If something was done on OCN, like original camera negative, and then you made an interpositive from it and an internegative from it, by the time it got to a print, it's going to lose a crazy amount of detail. And the truth of the matter is, as an exhibition format with a crazy amount of lumens flowing through that projector, the print is going to look, I think it's just going to have much more, there's going to be a little bit more, it's going to be more forgiving of certain details. But to me, film preservation, it's a mix between film preservation and restoration, where for us, film preservation is saving the element that has the most amount of information, where I think as long as, when we go back to the OCN, you're going to see more detail in the actual dark sections, and more information in the light sections, and the gradients of colors if we added HDR, and like a more wide color space, you'd be able to see much more of the actual film material itself, that originating element, which is there with the filmmaker on set, you know, if we were doing it from the OCN. So I wrestle with that constantly because I think a lot of people in preservation are like, let's just keep the OCN just in case, and let's make the digitally accessible version the print. And it's kind of like it seems counterintuitive to me at this point now that our scanners are so incredibly top notch, where we can get more information and we can see what the actual for me the revisionism is when you do something like what we have now, where it's like kind of like AI, where you can add something which is speculative and removes the hand of a objective worker, where basically our restoration team literally just removes dust. They remove scratches that are removable, and for us, that is being true to the film element itself. So for something like that, I think the for me it's you know, there are differing opinions, and that's what makes this not exactly a science. There's no right answer. There's maybe some place in between that, where I think you always want to go to the original element so that you can get the most amount of information. You know, if you what I think I see a lot of other labels doing is it's rights first. And to be perfectly honest, with our company, it's a terrible business model because of the fact that we're elements first. We find out whether or not there's a surviving element, which is pretty close to the OCN. Like for instance, like neither the sea or the sand this time, which is on one of our releases, was taken from an answer print. That's a print. That's an exhibition print essentially, which is made from an OCN. It's pretty close. So there's some detail, even though there's some generational loss. And it's for a different purpose other than duplicating more preprint elements. So I think to be perfectly honest, I think a lot of the revisionism is based on a rights first mentality, where this film needs to be put out, and this is lumped in with a lot of other films that we want to have put out. And what that means is they'll oftentimes just take the masters which were made already, which are often lower quality, and just either upscale it or just release it as is. And I think that's very sad and counterintuitive to me, because it is, to me it's inauthentic as well.
Yeah, and I think especially when the original filmmakers are involved, I think, like you say, some of these deals are you will release the version we've provided or you're not releasing it at all. And I guess from the label standpoint, it's very difficult because you would probably love to release those films. And there are so many examples that I could name, but yeah, it's just kind of, it must be so difficult to be making that decision of whether to release those versions.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, I think that's why it's really important to have like a kind of educated consensus, like where different people can add an opinion. It's not just one person making the entire decision. But it's a very complicated issue for me, because I think, there are a lot of, like, for instance, like Cannibal the Musical is for this month's Black Friday, or that last month it was released or something. But if the original element, the originating film element, you're never going to see it the way it actually was in that original element. And we really have no other choice because we know for a fact that it was thrown away. And there's something really sad about that. But, in cases like those, we just have to make really educated decisions. And we have to know which elements are better. Like, for instance, there are a bunch of instances of that. And I think it's just about educating people on which elements are, like, quote-unquote good elements, and which are kind of, like, lazy elements. Not that there's really a lazy element, but oftentimes I'll see a lot of labels just using prints or using IPs, interpositives or internegatives, when it's very well known where the actual OCN is. Like if it's a studio movie, it's very rare that they'll only have. It's pretty rare that they'll only have an interpositive left. So to me, it's very like it's a difficult issue because I think it's a cost issue when you're dealing with the studios. It's more to pull out the OCN versus like an interpositive usually, or if the interpositive has already been scanned, you don't have to pay for rescanning, you just have to pay for the license. So it's very complicated. It's very complicated, and oftentimes if I like, there's so many things that we have in the archive which are the best element, or maybe even the only element, and then it's just having to make a case for the elements value rather than the contents value, if that makes sense. But yeah, very, very, yeah, that's a good question. It's another thinker. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions, they do sort of morph into more philosophical questions, don't they? About like, for example, people will say if a filmmaker releases a new 4K restoration that they've approved and it doesn't look how people want it to look for whatever reason, maybe it's the colors or whatever, there's a question of who does the art belong to? Because you can say someone holds the rights to the art, the distribution rights, and they can change it. But really, when the art has been distributed and has been shown to people, you form a connection with the art, and in many ways it's as much your art as it is the artist. And when people, sometimes I have criticized certain restorations, for many reasons, and people will say to me, well, you're not the creator, so shut up, you don't have any say in what they should do with the film. But I kind of feel like, well, no, it is partly mine because that's my experience. And if you're going to release the film in a certain state to sell, then you do have to take into account the audience. It can't just be the wishes of the creator or the studio. So it does kind of get a bit philosophical as to who owns the art.
Totally. And I think one of the most important concepts, I think, for our field is like a film as an object. And I think for me, once it's, there's the concept of once something's on paper, it's for real. And for me, the film is that being on paper. You write it in pen. There's no eraser. You can remove dust scratches later, but there's really like you're writing it in pen, and this is permanent. And to me, that's why I think it's really valuable to kind of follow the film and follow the closest example of like what it's supposed to look like. I think, the classic, what everybody, and I believe you too. We're talking about the Cameron films, which were like, I think to me the, I agree with you. I think once it's out there, the consensus of the people should be like, the consensus of the people is really, really important. I don't know if it's, to me, this is my one, I think the artist's intent is very important. Because oftentimes what we get are slight tweaks on like whether or not a day for night scene is too dark or too light or something like that. Whereas with him and, the famous examples, the George Lucas and the original trilogy, where it's like, once something's complete, you want to keep working on it. That's just the way it is. You hear criticisms and you see emptiness and you see things where it could be tightened up, but there's something really important about that, setting it in stone and showing it for the first time. Film is a really complicated medium, and it passes through so many hands. It goes through the director's basically sitting back and just telling everybody what to do. Like film editor, cut off 3 frames. They're like, 3 frames, it's not going to make a difference. Cut off the 3 frames. Oh, can we add 1 frame back? Too late. It's going to... No. So I think the truth of the matter is it's like about following the film and trying to treat the film as a permanent object, and like, making sure that we're not swaying too much from that, because there are colors and color spaces which we can go to digitally in original negative film, which are not what should be in an actual photochemical element. Theoretically speaking, we could change things to orange, which are purple, or purple from orange or something like that. But like, there is a truth in basically if we have as many elements as we possibly can and trying to form a consensus based on how things have changed over time, or if they haven't changed over time, or if a good print was made which has very long-lasting color, or a good VHS transfer where the director is not shitting on it for the rest of his career. He's like, I hated that release. I hated working with Canon. I hated that release. Then we can kind of get a little bit closer to an objective, and we're never going to get to an objective, but we're gonna get really close if we do it the right way and we follow the film. So
it's interesting what you say about the color space and being able to get more out of it now than you could back then, and how certain filmmakers, some cinematographers that work on new restorations, they will say, we wanted it to look like this back then. But when you think about it, no one was grading their films like that back then. So it would have been very odd for you to have this one film that was kind of graded outside of the norms, and it just kind of makes me laugh a bit.
It's a perfect example, and I think sometimes that has happened, where like they've been like, I really wanted it like that, or the eyes were too red. I got like some glare, like some red eye on this person. Can we remove that? And there's this question about whether or not like we can, like, whether or not it's worth it to do that. For like to make maybe it'll make sometimes it's about like, sometimes you got to make the filmmaker happy, because they're really pivotal to this release, and they are like, so sometimes it's about making them happy, and then we sway a little bit from both of our, I think, objective truths regarding film preservation and restoration and color grading, because it's a very complicated art, and I think sometimes I think much more complicated than what I do, which is just digging through stuff. But I think because you have to take yourself out of it. And for me, when I handle a film, I'm automatically part of it. It's like it's something that I've held and I've put down. And my job after picking up and putting it down is advocating for it. Regardless of what it ends up being, I'm advocating for the film. And then to me, the digital space is a conduit to show people how great it is that film exists somewhere else. But it's a really important question, and it'll only become more important as we go on, because it's getting more complicated to actually divvy out what's real, what was there, what was not there, what is revisionism, because in the end, preservation is about history, and if we are wiping history or changing it, or changing how film was meant to look, it's kind of antithetical to what we're supposed to, our MO is, So I agree with you. And it's just about straightforwardness too. I think talking about releases, I wish the special features producers would talk about like the choices that they made or the color graders, but they're behind the scenes. They like being behind the scenes, which is probably good. But yeah.
To me, it almost reminds me of the conversations that went on back in the 80s, when there was all the colorization of black and white films. That was a big question of, do we do this, do we not do this? And obviously many filmmakers went against it and said, no, let's definitely not do this. It is kind of interesting because I think the important kind of fundamental thing is, for me anyway, when I look at a restoration or when I look at any presentation of a film, I don't want it to look great. I want it to look correct. I want it to look right. No, there's no kind of subjective goodness or excellence that I want. I want it to look correct, and whatever that means is up for debate. But like we've said, kind of, I want it to look how it looked back when it was first shown.
In your opinion, for instance, the BFI, the big banana feet. Was that not just in your opinion? Because I didn't get to see the release, unfortunately, not yet. But because it was from a print, is that ever a barrier to entry when you're watching something? Does it ever take you out of a movie or something like that?
I don't think so. I think when I know that that's the case, I'm able to go along with it in a sense. Yeah, like with Big Banana Feet, that's something I'd never seen before because you just couldn't really see it. I think it was on there were some dodgy VHS copies that were existing, but yeah, you just couldn't see it. So seeing it now, it's just great to have it, and of course, it would always be great to go back to a better element, a more original element. But like just this week, I watched the new release of Scarface, the Howard Hawks one that Criterion just released.
Paul Mooney.
And yeah, Paul Mooney, and that 4K. That they didn't go back to the original camera negative because I think it's lost. I don't think that it exists anymore, and you can tell watching it that they haven't gone back to, a super crisp kind of source and got the maximum amount of detail they can. So I'm very aware of it, but as long as I know that going in, it doesn't really ruin an experience. If someone tells me I'm about to watch a 4K restoration that's from the original camera negative, and then it looks terrible, then I'm annoyed because I feel like I've been lied to in a sense.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Where I think we have oftentimes when we get stuff, we have everything. We have like the original negative 2 prints, and I think there's a really big value in prints, and I think oftentimes the print becomes the master. So master, whatever you want to use for that term, but I think I agree. Like what they did, where I imagine there's like an intertitle at the very beginning, where it basically said this is, or obviously they made it very clear it's from a print. But I like that we do that as well when there's an issue with something related to the release, because those are carefully worded, because we want to be as truthful as humanly possible. And there's so many instances of a lack of clarity in language, like being detriment to the actual film material itself, or the film experience of the film itself for the viewer.
There are some Blu-ray labels that, I'm not going to name any names, but they will put something to the effect of film from a new 4K master, and that could mean anything. And often it does mean anything. It's not, you don't get what you want when you hear the word 4K. That kind of evokes a certain thing in your head. Yeah, exactly, a buzzword. So yeah, I think clarity is definitely something that I think the industry could be a bit better at. Like you say, Vinegar Syndrome, they're excellent at it, and many companies are excellent at it. But sometimes it's a bit misleading towards the customer who may not even understand all of this too well.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, I think I tried to be really diplomatic with this kind of stuff. I mean, we talked about it before, and where I'm like sometimes like archivally petty, where I'm just like, oh, okay, why did they do that? But like, I think yeah, some of there's a very interesting like overlapping between film preservation and um, like the film industry. The truth of the matter is, while truth is very important to archives as keepers of history, if you look back, there hasn't been any legislation since the 80s. Uh, when things were put out on crappy VHSs, which were duped from video masters, there hasn't been any legislation saying to film distributors, you have to be truthful about what elements you use. It would be too difficult to lock down. Um, so there's this really interesting overlap where I find it really important, and I feel like it's a really big crux of this whole issue, where for me, it's like I wish I could just say, they're saying 4K master UHD, but they used a print. Uh, they used a print, and the OCN is in this lab here, and all you have to do is ask them and then ship it, and it's going to cost $5,000 to ship it. Like,
Yeah.
I would wish I could just be like, I mean, it happened with a, I'm not going there, but with an OCN that basically, there's a release of a film, which I found the OCN for, offered it to someone who wanted to, basically do a preservation of it. And turns out that the company who owned it basically was already putting it out from another element. And they were so far along, so close to the actual release that they're like, oh, we don't have time to scan the OCN and release this thing. And I was just kind of like sitting there, just like, we just found the most important element. It was given to basically put on a platter to them, free to use, and still, because of the fact that they were so far along or something, they didn't want to upgrade it to another format. They chose not to do it. And I hope when, as Vinegar Syndrome continues on the road that we're going, people continue seeing us as hopefully a truthful mode of getting a little bit more insight into the films and the film material itself, because it's not an easy position to take, to basically be the first person to tell someone that half of the OCN was thrown away and half of it's going to have to be from a print. So it's going to be always going to be on Blu-ray instead of 4K UHD, but the truth of the matter is, the newest buzzwords and selling points to an actual film release is it 4K? Restored in 4K. That's awesome. But let's have it actually be visible to the actual people who are going to watch it at home. Ideally, restored in 4K is good. Is it a new restoration, or is it something which has been done before? Is it 4K is a big one. OCN's a big one. I've seen a lot of labels that don't know what an OCN is. There are a lot of labels who have put things out of really important films which say it's OCN. It's a dupe neg. Anybody who is in film preservation can tell that it's a dupe neg. And because we're it's tricky. It's this professionalism thing, which sometimes I'm very bad at because I'm petty, archivally petty. But I think sometimes I'm just kind of I feel like it's not a legislation thing. I don't want that, but it would be really nice if every film distributor literally did have an archivist who was literally there to be we can't just put it on the Blu-ray because we can put it on the Blu-ray as a selling point or as a sales pitch. It has to be there because it means something, because otherwise none of this means anything. An OCN can look like a dupe neg. It's not going to look like a dupe neg. So it's really complicated, and it's a really big issue, this transparency and being straightforward with the actual people who are buying these things, because if you want something, you want it on your shelf in the best format that it's ever going to look. And that is a point of truth, like a point of pride for us, where we get to deliver stuff. You may not like the movies sometimes. People may not always love the movies. They may be kind of like, they may use a few too many mannequins and throw too many zombies over cliffs, but you can be sure that that is the best copy of that film that you're ever going to see. And if not, then we're going to continue searching for the best version, and then eventually release it in 4K UHD.
It's a very complicated subject matter. But yeah, there's always, I could talk about this stuff for forever and ever, and I'm sure you could as well. But let's talk about some of the titles in the sale, because I do want to get onto the sale. What are you excited about in the sale when you look at what's in there, and especially the surprise ones that just came out today?
Yeah, so I guess we can from the last one we did like Congo Cannibal, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which is enormous, took a really long time. The Ron Sullivan on Dystropix, and for this time, and Blood Trucks. But for this time, we just released our new slate. I don't know when this is going up, but it's very fresh. So we're getting people's direct responses to the one on like, why isn't it this? But the biggest ones are The Keep, which is like a long sought after, like everybody has wanted this, which is essentially Michael Mann's abandoned genre love child of Tarkovsky mixed with what would be a good second one?
I was going to say Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes, I like that. Yeah, it's got the Nazis. It's got the old keep. Which again, I think the keep took an enormous amount of work to not only the restoration team, Curtis Spieler, Dave Sikora, and Brandon Upson have been working on this one forever, because it's a really important title for people to have on physical media. And yep. I've got to say, as someone who watched it again on 4K UHD, I think this is like one of these movies which is made for the format. The smoke, the atmosphere, the texturing of the actual Shrine of the Keep. I think there's going to be, I'm hoping that there's going to be a re-analysis of the actual film's cultural worth, because it looks incredible. Like, the effects work that was done is mind-blowing. And it's a famous movie. It's a famous 1983 movie where basically Michael Mann made it. Michael Mann's a very famous director. Everybody knows like a bunch of his other films. He's not known for genre film in this method, not known for sci-fi. And I'm not, if people are interested in your Raiders of the Lost Ark comment is perfect, because it's basically Nazis camping out in an old keep, and then they basically are like, don't touch the crosses. There's 108 nickel crosses. And then there's one which is made of actual silver. And then, of course, they were like, oh, fuck the nickel. We'll go to the silver one. And then something is unleashed. And the entire film kind of works as like a parable. And it's very poetic, and it's beautifully shot. There's incredible cinematography, and yeah, it's a very beautiful movie. I'm glad we put it out, and the with studios and stuff like that. Oftentimes, movies like this, which have been long sought after on home media, have a very storied history with like why it's not on home media. And this one was purely because the studios, not in all cases, but if a film director has become as important as someone like Michael Mann has become, there is a certain level of respect where basically they're just like, we're not going to put this out because you don't want it put out. And he's like, good. And eventually when they get, it goes around that like no one's able to put out the keep, stop asking about it. And then eventually there comes a time when somebody at Paramount, the person who figured out the keep for us is a really great film preservationist, I think, and someone who cares about access, and really advocated for the keep, asked Michael Mann's people, and they were like, go ahead, and it was all up in the air, and nothing ever leaked about it, and no one ever found out anything preemptively about the keep in any way. But so no one knew that it was coming today. And the other secret title is Sliver, which is like there was that big craze in the 80s and 90s of like these very erotic thrillers, but it's written by the same screenwriter as Basic Instinct and Showgirls.
Yeah, it's
one of your first Vinegar.
Joe Esterhaas.
Yeah, so you kind of, if you go into it knowing that, you'll know kind of what it is. It's really beautiful cinematography. It's the restoration is from the OCN, so it looks really nice, and the interiors are really pretty. And yeah, Sharon Stone is great, and yeah. See, 90s movies are not my not my favorite thing, but it looks really nice. It looks really nice, and the extras are good. So those are the two secret ones. The other one that I'm very excited about is Who Killed Teddy Bear, which is the long lost cut of Who Killed Teddy Bear. So I worked on that one. So basically, originally, the OCN was found by our acquisitions person, Joe Rubin, in some, mossed over, adding mythology to it, smoked out film vault somewhere, and he dug it out.
There was a wizard there looking over it.
3 riddles. Yeah. And he said, no, I just want the OCN. He's like, okay, fine. Yeah. So he was the one who found the original camera negative, and the interesting facet of that film, I think, is that, there's this long lost cut, which has never been on disc, and essentially, in order, the famous way that you can tell, I think the most commonly available version is the version with a very blurred out, there's a sensuous scene at the very beginning, and it's blurred out in the most commonly accessible version. So we put the OCN on, and the OCN had that blurred out section. We're like, that's not good. So we went to Owen Klein, a close relative of the actual original director, Joseph Cates, and basically, essentially, that footage was in that print. So we were able to kind of cobble it together through these two sources, and and it's on Cinematograph, which is basically our art house label, which is managed by Justin Liberty, and I think also worth noting on that one is there's a really great audio commentary by one of my heroes, Liz Purcell. So that's very worth seeing. Has Salmoneo in it, and very famous for many things, including Rebel Without a Cause. But yeah, it's pretty good. Very lost, forgotten classic. And yeah, we have neither the sea or the sand. To be perfectly honest, haven't seen this one yet. But I've seen enough to be like, this is a very brooding, like Antonioni-esque, I think it's like a stalker narrative. I haven't watched the entire thing, so I can't. But I think it's gonna be cool.
Well, you've sold me already on that one.
Okay, good. Very brooding. Yeah, I'm not the best salesman. I'm more of like I blow off dust off the reels type of guy. But the yeah, but that one is like, to be perfectly honest, that movie is on VSL, which is kind of like our experimental label where we put things out and they don't really fit on with the rest of what we do, but we think they're kind of like somehow in line. And that one was largely advocated for by Joe, because Joe Rubin really likes that movie, and it's just like I think it feels like I hope it'll do well, because I think it needs people to like rediscover it and actual see value in it. But yeah. What is the last one? Which one am I missing?
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
The VSA. The VSA is here. So the VSA is Women on the Run, another 90s movie. Not, I'm not going to say that I don't like 90s movies, but
what is it with 90s movies? What is it you don't?
It's an aesthetic thing.
Aesthetic, yeah, okay.
It's an aesthetic thing. I don't like the way that negative stock looks in the 90s. It's like a very like bad. It's where I can't get past my archivisty thing. The moment I kind of realized why I didn't like what I was looking at, I was just kind of like, I think the grain is a little bit too fine at that point, and I think meaning like it doesn't have like that textural quality. I think but regardless, Women on the Run is like a Corey Yuen movie, and yeah, the VSA line was kind of like a random grab bag of things that you may find in like an old VHS store, and it has as with most of the Hong Kong films that we've been able to put out, it's largely underseen, needs also definitely wasn't leaked at any point, and stop looking at everything, people. If you're Vinegar Syndrome people, stop looking at everything.
I mean, people are obsessed, which is a good thing, but they love it.
Yeah,
they love it.
It's a nightmare though, because imagine having an entire archive to jump around and do little dances in, like I like to do, and then being told, "Oh, I can see that title there. You can't use that shot." But that one has a really great, as with all of them, I believe Sam Deegan has a great video essay. Sam Deegan, the legendary writer and historian, who's very awesome. And yeah, so those are kind of like the main labels. And then there's on district, I think on the Melusine, there's Alexandria, which looks incredible. If you're interested in the adult stuff, like if you want to get into the deep hard end of things, there's Alexandria, which is from the archive as well. Yeah, that's supporting that kind of stuff. It's weird, but the rights are oftentimes owned by us. So essentially, what we put into it are basically the expenses for storage of the film and restoration of the film and color grading of the film and extras. So that added expense of not having to do look into rights is really important for those releases too, because it literally funds what we can find in the future. It sounds like counterintuitive. Let's buy smut to support the film archive, but it literally does really make a difference to us because of the fact that that added amount that we would have paid for rights can literally just go straight into buying Tuscan cans or new film collections. So we have a lot of film collections. We have currently one that we're looking into, which is just going to be really, I want to bring it in because they're films which I think are going to be really challenging and aesthetically interesting. And, it's weird, but supporting those types of things literally does keep the archive functioning. And me hired,
yeah.
Probably. I never realized that. Wow. Yeah.
So please, anyone watching, please keep buying that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In addition, and also check out Cannibal the Musical and the Ron Sullivan set and Black Eyed Susan. Um, Cannibal the Musical is probably going to be gone by the time the sale ends. So that has sold crazy quickly, rightfully so, because I think it's an amazing movie, obviously, and but also Black Eyed Susan because it supports our future productions. We have like two more big ones which are, in finishing stages, and we want to keep shooting stuff on film, even though it's really impractical and it's difficult. But yeah, that's kind of the sale rundown, I think. But yeah, the biggest ones for me, I think the most interesting ones largely are the Keep and Who Killed Teddy Bear, in terms of like the sheer amount of like weight of that boulder that needed to be pushed up the hill.
Yeah.
So yeah, glad those.
And then another recent one that I would want to get is The Tenant on 4K.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I imagine that's 4K. A popular one.
Very, 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 very popular, and it seems, Roman Polanski has a storied, very controversial history, and but the person's art is important.
I was going to say we'd need another podcast to devote
to delve into, yeah. But of our like Paramount releases, I think that is a really really big one and a really big get, because I think Polanski is a difficult figure, but I think in terms of dealing with the relationship between drama and like psychosexuality, or whatever you want to call it, or claustrophobia, or these types of things, which are really, to me, central to the types of movies that Vinegar Syndrome puts out. It's a really big get, and it's really cool. Ryan Emerson, one of the owners, designed this really cool window box set, where basically, because of the famous repeating window scene. So I think that one's definitely worth checking out and looks pretty fucking incredible, if I can say so myself. But yeah, and I'm hoping that we can continue doing more Paramount stuff and they keep giving us more fun things. I think the next round is coming up, and I feel like there's some really cool things coming up, I hope, if it all works out. But yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's given us a lot to kind of think about, and while people are shopping at the sale this weekend, lots of good recommendations there. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to cover? Anything else you want to throw out there?
I don't know. Do you have any like what should we put out next? What is your opinion? Do you think?
Well, it's funny because we've been talking about The Keep. That was one of those titles that I thought would probably not get a release anytime soon, and there's a few titles on that list for me. Well, one of them recently was when Criterion released Freaks on Blu-ray. I didn't think Freaks was going to get a release anytime soon. Obviously, there's Ken Russell's The Devils. People are always calling for that from Warner Brothers. I mean, what about you? What are these impossible releases? Obviously, you can't tip off any that you're actually working on, but outside of that, what are some of the impossible ones?
Okay, I won't give out any future titles, but if you like put my sentence that I'm about to say on a piece of paper and word it frame it the right way, you'll be able to read down and it'll be the actual title.
Yeah.
I think for me, some of my like weird goals are, I hope we delve more into I think I like the ambitious things. I like the I'm really enjoying delving more into the shot on film but edited on tape things. I think there are a few ones from that era. They're just really, like, to be perfectly honest, it's an time expense issue where we have to scan so many reels, and then you have to conform it. So it's 3 jobs where normally there would be one. We're just scanning. and then restoration gets it. But I want to do more of those. MGM has a really great comedy backlog, and I'd like to dig into that, but I just don't know. I don't know if I'm wondering if people are gonna buy comedies on 4K UHD. I don't know if those translate, but I think it would be worth trying.
Definitely.
And so those are high up on my list. I'm not going to say any titles because but I think those are high up on my list. I think there's very obviously I'm very keen on I did this. I think I sent it to you, the Satan's Black Wedding and Raid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to get into those. I want to dig into the Lost films, and hopefully that's closer than just a dream in a poor archivist's brain. But so I'm hoping that we can do more of those, and yeah, there's a lot in the Nick Millard collection that I would really love to do. It's just really complicated because of the fact that his collection was Valerie Millard is amazing and really like has given us like so much in terms of her family legacy and her father's filmmaking legacy. But I think it's just really complicated because it was stored so poorly for so long, and it's going to be a lot of like weird, intricate work. Some of the only tracks available for some of these lost films are only on tape. So we have the complete OCNs for some of them, and then the track will be on tape. So it'll be this weird discrepancy. But I'm very excited about those. Those are big on my list.
See, the thing is, when you ask me that question about what are the films I would love to see come out, already the Vinegar Syndrome catalogue, there's so much I've not seen yet. So, I could happily put a pause on it and go back, and I'd have years worth of stuff to watch anyway. So I don't want to be too greedy. I don't want to be like, I want more. Give me more.
Okay, yeah, then yeah. I mean, I want to do the same. I want to focus on our back catalog too, because we've found better elements for things that we thought we had the best element for, and now we have better elements. So literally, I'm kind of the same. Like, I wish we could put out things that we used prints for, and make an actual 4K UHD of something. There's a trauma movie which fits that bill, and I hope it's just about whether or not it'll actually sell. It has to move, unfortunately, and 4K UHD is in its infancy still, kind of, but yeah. I don't know. Yeah. What did you think of Showgirls and Patrick Swayze?
Yeah, Roadhouse.
Roadhouse, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were amazing.
They look really nice, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. MGM has an amazing catalog. They have like a great catalog, and they keep the OCNs. They keep almost all the OCNs really in good condition. So I'm happy when we are able to continue working with them. I think it's like, they have a great amount of stuff, unmined stuff, which we can still hopefully mine and make look really nice. So
yeah,
without changing it.
But well, yeah, I do hope that the bigger companies do recognize the value in what you guys are doing. I think they do. They must do if they're giving you letting you access these films.
But I think there was like maybe I'm talking out of turn, but like and people can shame me if that's true. But I think there was probably a barrier to it, where there are these kooky people in Bridgeport, Connecticut, named Vinegar Syndrome, which is something that they don't want to deal with already as film people, who put out a lot of smut and stuff like that, where basically there probably was a hurdle where they're like, should we give these valuable titles to these guys? And I think the thankful thing is that we do care about the film, and we come from a film first background. So I think now they kind of have, not unilaterally, but largely agreed that we can trust them with this our intellectual property.
Mm.
They're not going to like put shame on our films or change them too much. But I hope there's so much stuff left to go through. But yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, good stuff. I think we might have to cut it short. I say cut it short. It's been almost 2 hours. But I think, yeah. But listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the channel, having a conversation finally. And I feel like I could go on forever talking about this stuff.
I guess we'll switch to emails. Uh, um, but yeah, it was a pleasure being here. So, and thank you for your questions. They're really insightful, and I appreciate, like, especially the question about authenticity. It's something which I like for the actual getting the best release. I think it's something which I don't think is brought up enough, and like, you know, I think it's very difficult to put on paper what vinegar syndrome is, but I think the authenticity to the film element, I think it's pretty good introduction to what we're about. Um, we're not ever going to be known for the greatest movies, only the greatest movies of all time. But we're going to hopefully be known for how much we care about the actual film materials and the authenticity to the actual original film experience. So I appreciate you bringing that up and that you care about that just as much as I have.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone listening wants to find more about you and what you do, of course you're on the Vinegar Syndrome YouTube channel in the great videos that you've been making lately. Do you have any other online presence? I don't even know myself, actually.
No.
No.
I do not. I'm very scared of social media, and I
Yeah.
don't like digital. It's the digital stuff. I'm very bad with digital stuff. I have like a private Facebook account, and I've gotten many messages from people angry about their shipping not getting to them. So I've kind of slowed down, and like I'm not accepting unless I've met you in person, and or
Yeah.
we've talked for an extended period of time. I apologize to anybody, but like I'm very analog, and I like no distractions. I like going to work, winding through my films, and trying to get them out there, or or dancing around on videos. So if you care about like learning about the behind the scenes process, my online presence is on YouTube. So if you want to go to see some of my favorites are Cannibal the Musical one. I think Story of a Junkie explains editing really well, and I think movie that you liked, the Southern Comfort, I think was a really
Yes.
great video of in my humble opinion, because Benjamin puts them together. Dave Sikora in Restoration basically shoots and directs them, and I'm impossible to direct, so he does a really good job. And so I think if supporting those things, I think weirdly enough, also if you want to see more behind the scenes, check those things out. They're interesting sometimes, and other times I'm just dancing around and making corny jokes. Yeah.
Well, I love it, so please keep doing it. Yeah, it's great. Um, so let's wrap up then. Thank you very much to everyone that has been listening this far. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to get involved, just leave a comment on this video, and if there's anything that interests you, please have your own discussions there. And until next time, keep watching great films.